So take us through that diagnosis and talk about the stages of where you are today.
Sure. Back in 2013, I had some fatigue issues, but I was convinced that nothing was wrong. You may recall at that time I had been unemployed for 2 years, had just gotten a job offer from a ministry in Chattanooga, and Kim and I were so convinced that that's what God wanted us to do, that all this testing we were doing was just to confirm that we're fine and we need to go to Chattanooga. So we were just positive about that. And so then on the Monday morning, a week before I was supposed to start, we finally had a follow-up visit at what I call my neighborhood neurologist. And at that point, he told us, something's wrong here. And he called it a pre-ALS condition. And he said, and by the way, you can't do that job. He knew what I was headed to do. So that was a game changer, obviously. I had to call Precept and tell him, I'm not coming. I'm not going to take your money. I know how hard and precious ministry money is, and I just can't do it. And then on February 13th of that year, we got a second opinion at Emory, which is the ALS clinic for Georgia. And the chief neurologist said, it's ALS. I don't know how else to tell you. It's straight up ALS. And boom, talk about life-changing. So that was, I think we received the news well. As a matter of fact, I think we received it better than he gave it. It's very interesting. Casey, you and I, we've worked with a lot of people. We've tried to help a lot of people. And, but I've never made a living telling somebody they're going to die. And when you're a neurologist dealing with ALS, you probably tell 2 or 3 people a week that that's going to happen. There were 2 fellows in the room that day, 2 women doctors, and they were standing back, arms across the chest, just bracing themselves. It was like they're expecting us to rush them or something. What were they expecting? But I could tell they were all nervous. And I finally said to the doctor, just wait a minute. My mother had Alzheimer's. My wife has had breast cancer. This is the 3rd time I've had this discussion. Just tell us what we're dealing with. And we just started working the problem. The disease in and of itself is still a great mystery. No known cause, no known cure. And it was first identified right after the Civil War over in Europe. So people have been aware of this for a long time. Obviously, when Lou Gehrig was diagnosed with this, he only lived 2 to 3 years. His was very progressive. That brought a lot of attention to it, but there hasn't been much discussion even since those days. But amyotrophic lateral sclerosis means a lot of things, not the least of which is amyotrophic is a word that means no muscle nourishment. And if you don't feed a living being, it's going to die. And the muscles begin to die. The other thing that happens is it is also a nerve disease, and the nerves begin to detach from the muscles. So your muscles aren't getting direction, so they're not getting used, so that they atrophy. And eventually, ALS patients become somewhat vegetative. Now, the good news is, from my perspective, I'm not sure the caregivers would agree with this, it doesn't really affect the mind. I'm very familiar with Alzheimer's. My mother had that, and that is so cruel. But I've been able to maintain cognition. I've been able to continue to work and think and write, and that has been a blessing beyond measure for me, because I'm wired for production.